Hello, and welcome to the metadata tutorial for the Santa Barbara Coastal Long-Term Ecological Research Project. So today we'll be walking through the protocol necessary to prepare your datasets and accompanying metadata for submission and publication through the Santa Barbara Coastal LTER data site. Today, we'll be instructing you on how to prepare metadata, which is required to accompany all published data sets. And essentially, this is meant to provide additional clarity for yourself, as well as other researchers that may want to use these data sets for future analyses. In addition, this protocol adheres to the ecological metadata language and the Environmental Data Initiative repository standards. As a bonus, your dataset will be assigned a Creative Commons license, as well as become discoverable through the Data One repository. But perhaps most importantly, this process will help you to create a permanent location for your data. Now, before we begin this process today, please be sure that you have prepared and have a couple of things on hand. First, you'll need to be sure that you have an abstract compiled for your data. So this is not an abstract for your project or for an accompanying manuscript, but rather it's for the data itself. There should be a few sentences describing the general background or research questions of the project, experimental and survey setup, the contents of each of the data tables, some general information about spatial and temporal coverage, and then if there is an accompanying or corresponding manuscript, you can list that as well. You should also have prepared all of the appropriate analyses and methods that were used to assemble this data set. So that may be field, lab, or computational protocols. And finally, you'll need the data sets themselves, specifically in a tidy format. And what we mean by tidy is that there is one variable per column, one observation per row, and one value per cell. In addition, there should be no blank cells in these data sets. So please be sure to choose a symbology for indicating missingness, whether that be NA, 999, whatever you choose should be consistent across the columns within a data set and across data sets themselves. Finally, please take care not to use any special characters or spaces in the column names so that these data sets are as machine readable and accessible as possible. Once you've compiled your abstract, your methods, and your data sets, you are prepared to submit using the templates that we'll be walking through in just a moment. I do want to take this opportunity though, if you have any questions after walking through this tutorial with us that you feel were not answered by this video, please feel free to contact the LTER's information manager, Lee, and I've listed her email address there, which is lkui@ucsb.edu. But at this moment, we're going to be working through the metadata templates, which can be accessed at the LTER's website at sbclter.msi.ucsb.edu. So once you've navigated to the Santa Barbara Coastal LTER's homepage, along the top bar, you'll notice one of the options is Data. If you visited the site before, you might be familiar with all of the published data sets available in the SBC data catalog. But today, we're going to be working through the data help desk portion. This is where supplementary materials, as well as all the metadata templates that we'll be using, are stored. So today, we're going to be focused on this dataset publication section. If you find, again, that you have additional questions, we have another resource documents here, so the SBC Data Publication Instructions, which is a PDF document that provides many of the same instructions we'll be working through today. If you'd like to read this on your own time, you're more than welcome to. But as I mentioned, we'll be covering much of this material today. So let's go ahead and download the template. They should all appear in a zipped file that downloads to your personal machine. And when you open it, there should be a number of files in there. Let's walk through them one by one. First, let's open the abstract file. It should be a Microsoft Word document. And you'll notice with many of the templates as we walk through them today, they have some information populated already, acting as sort of a prompt for the kind of information you could input yourself. So today, I'll be replacing all of this information with my own project information. So the project I'll be using today collected some oceanographic data on a daily timescale back in the summer of 2018. So I'm going to take this moment to remove the existing data, excuse me, and populate it with data that pertains to my own project. Keep in mind, this information pertains to the data sets, not to the project or accompanying manuscript. So I have a sentence introducing the project itself, a little bit of information about the field sampling, and my final sentence here describes the data that I'll be submitting. If you're submitting multiple data tables or data sets at once, you'll want to provide just a brief phrasing or synopsis of each of them here. Once you've populated your abstract, let's open our methods document. The methods document, again, already contains some information about a study that's ongoing in the LTR, but isn't our project, so we're going to remove that and populate it instead with information that pertains to our particular project. So here I've provided some information about the actual field sampling that took place, a little bit of information about the actual instrument that was used to collect this information. And then in the second paragraph, I've provided information about the analyses and computation that was involved in processing the data. If you'd like to go so far as to provide names of the actual applications used, you can do so. And if you feel it's necessary to add in any citations, you can do so as well. So we worked through the abstract and the protocols for your data set. So the final file in that templates folder is metadata entry underscore LTER. Let's go ahead and open that up. So this is where we get into the really detail of the data sets that you'll be submitting. And all of the information for all of the data sets will be contained in this one Excel file. Everything you see here that's in yellow is your responsibility to complete, and everything that is in white will be updated by the information manager as it pertains to your particular data submission. So in this first tab, titled Data Set, we'll be providing overall information. So in this case, the title of my data project, I'll be replacing the investigator name with my own, and then finally the collection name. So the collection name is actually one that's already been created by the LTER. So if you navigate to the data catalog online, you'll notice that all the data sets are actually organized by collection. And that's just meant to sort of aggregate the data sets in a more cohesive way, specifically aggregating them by theme. In most cases, the data set that you're submitting should already pertain to one of the existing collections. But if you truly feel that you need to create a new collection, you can certainly contact Lee and do so. But in this case, my oceanographic study pertained to many of the other projects examining nitrogen dynamics, so I've chosen to submit it under that collection. Once you've completed the overall title, let's move to the second tab, Dataset Entities. This is where you'll actually describe the unique data sets you're submitting. So today, I'm only submitting one data set. And here you'll be providing the name as it appears on the website or the data catalog. And the description, again, as it will appear on the website, just to provide some additional information for those who might be interested in it. And finally, on this tab, you'll want to provide the actual name of the file that you're submitting. So in most cases, many of you will be submitting CSV files, maybe a text file, but in any case, this is where you'll specify the file type and the full file name. All right, so let's navigate to the third tab, Dataset Attributes. And this is where we'll actually be providing column by column information for the dataset of interest. So entity sort order refers to the unique data sets. I'm only submitting one, so I'm going to remove the rest of these. And here in column position, it's exactly that. It's referring to the number of columns in a data set. So my data set only has 5 columns. Column name should match the column names of your data set exactly. So when you're completing this field, you should take care not to have any special symbols or spaces in these names. Attribute label instead is a user-friendly column label that's a little bit easier for users to understand. So these might be the same length as your column names or a bit longer, but just provide a little bit more information for the future user and potentially for future you. So just to review, our entity sort order is the unique number of data sets. Column position indicates the column within a given data set. Column name is exactly as it appears in the data set. An attribute label provides users with slightly more information about each of the columns. Next, we'll add in a description, much as we've done before, simply to provide some additional clarity for the intended users. And as we scroll even further, we can actually provide in our formatting string here. This is where if you have a string rather than a numeric value, if it's formatted in a particular way you feel would be necessary for the future user to know for their analyses, you'll indicate it here. So I have a very particular date format that I want my future users to know about. I also want to take care to specify any of the units. So you can do so in the unit column. And finally, in the precision numeric column, based on the method that you're using, you can specify the precision of a given method or analysis. And very importantly, you want to be sure to denote how you are denoting missingness, which in my case, I've just chosen to denote throughout the entire data set using NAs. Now let's go ahead and navigate to dataset keywords. Here, you want to use a series of words to describe the data set. And you can see that many of these could be used as a prompt or even included in your own project. I've chosen to change quite a few, but in essence, you want them to denote where the data was collected, and that could be a specific site or ecosystem. You might want to include some themed keywords, such as here I have nitrogen, chlorophyll, carbon, and then also maybe some broader keywords, such as long-term ecological research or Santa Barbara coastal even. And if you're unsure of what keywords to use, there is a bank available for you to peruse. Now let's move on to the Dataset Personnel tab. This one is fairly straightforward. So as you can imagine, you'll just want to replace these names here with the names of your collaborators and folks who were involved with collecting this data set. If you are already in some way associated with the LTER, you don't need to do this next step, but if you have not yet published with the LTR, whether dataset or manuscript, it's advised that you include both your ORC ID and your email at this stage. just to properly catalog you in the system. On the next tab, Dataset Sites, is where you will specify where this data was collected. Now, in some cases, you might be collecting from sites that are routinely a part of many of the LTER studies, in which case there may already be a stock site code and description available for you on their website. In my case, there wasn't. So I have gone ahead and specified the exact latitude and longitude from which this data was collected, and this little note prompts you to do exactly that. On the next tab for Dataset Temporal, you want to take a moment and enter in the full time range that your study encompasses. If your data collection is ongoing, you can certainly come back in and change this. But for the time being, just put in the data frame or the time frame, that's being encompassed by the data that you're submitting. And finally, on this last tab for the dataset methods, you don't actually have to do anything. We've already filled out the method document, which will be accompanying your abstract and this document for your submission. Once you have filled out the abstract, the method, and this Excel metadata document, you want to pair it with your data sets and send all of those files to Lee at the address that was mentioned earlier. And if you have additional questions, feel free to ask her or refer to the additional instructions that were demonstrated on the SBCLTER's website. Thank you very much for listening to this tutorial today and for helping us achieve our goals of more open and accessible data for the environmental science community.